Hey y'all, it's Ashley Bookish Realm and I am here back with another video. So as you can see, I have this pencil or pen. It's a pen, not a pencil. And I have I have contemplated how to do this video for a while now because I am super behind on the weekly wrap-ups. Like incredibly behind on the weekly wrap-ups. And so I have read so much at this point in between when I did that last wrap-up and now. It's been like a month, maybe a little over a month. And so I've accumulated a lot of titles that I've read since then. And as you can see from the title of this video, I have read over 300 books so far this year. A lot of those numbers are going to be slightly inflated because of the amount of picture books that I've been reading, but I made a promise to myself this year that I was going to effectively track them, and it actually has helped me a lot at work. It's helped me a lot in terms of being actively aware of all the stuff that's coming out. And it's just helping me in a very professional way. So with that being said, that's why that number is so big. Now, I think still, even though it's been kind of a hiccup in the weekly wrap-ups because of the fact that I inevitably took a break, National Library Week happened, and so now we're at a point where I think things are kind of flowing back into a normal space. I have not had the opportunity to do a weekly wrap-up. So in order to kind of cover what I've been reading or what I've read since that last wrap up, I am simply going to use this space here today to mention the titles and highlight some that I think are standouts. This probably is going to include titles that I didn't really talk about in that quarter one session that quarter one video that I did, the best and the worst of quarter one, which I'll link up in the description box above. It probably will not include any of those titles simply because of the fact that I have, or it may, it depends. But the first quarter was January, February, March, and a lot of this stuff is coming out of some of March and a lot of April and the first half of this month. So I'm just going to mention the titles that I've read. I'm going to highlight a couple that I think stand out, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about what I'm currently reading. And then what we're going to do is, as of next week, we're going to reset and pick back up where I inevitably have left off, which is fine. So the biggest section, I'm going to divide this up like I would in a typical weekly wrap up, and when I go over this, you're going to be like, okay, I see exactly why Ashley decided that she was not going to do a wrap up, because this would have been so much content to go over and so much footage to capture that it just would have been excessive, and I did not want to do that to myself. So the first section that we're going to go over, the books that I'm going to mention, are going to be the picture books, and then I'll go back and I will highlight a couple that I think are standouts for the ones that I've read, and then I'll do that for each category. I probably won't do that as much, of course, for the graphic novels, comics, and manga, simply because I have another channel that covers all of that information and I don't want to double dip. I just think that that's kind of pointless at this time, but I will go back for the picture books, the beginner readers, and the novels that I've read. I will directly talk about some of those that I think are standout titles. So this is going to be a big section, so bear with me as I go through all this. Editing me is going to be so upset. Editing me is not going to be happy at all, and that's okay. We're just accepting it. We're gonna go with it. All right, so we have Go Forth and Tell, This Wolf Was Different, Hooray for She, He, Z, and They, Bros, Like You, Like Me, Glenn Burke, Game Changer, My Thoughts Have Wings, The Reflection in Me, Mommy's New Friend, Program to Paint, Luigi the Spider Who Wanted to Be a Kitten, Wherever You Go, Girls of the World, The Good Little Mermaid's Guide to Bedtime, No Cats in the Library, Fish of Small Wishes, The Drama Llama, Someone Just Like You, Lucky Dogs, What's New Daniel, Do I Have to Go to the Party, Daisy the Daydreamer, Ramadan Kareem, Zion Unmatched, A True Wonder, Butterfly on the Wind, Mighty Mike, Circle of Love, When the Rain Came Down, Remembering Rosalind Franklin, My First Earth Day, The Blue Bowl, Bears and Bears Stay Healthy, You're Going to Love This Book, A Penguin Like Me, Quiet Forest, Love the Earth, The House Before Falling into the Sea, It's Holy, A Garden Called Home, Metal Baby, Jose Feeds the World, A Plate of Hope, I Am Osage, What's Inside a Bird's Nest, Best Believe, The Fabulous Fanny Farmer, or is it Fanny Farmer? Fanny Farmer, I'm sorry. A Grand Idea, Change is in the Air, Jumbo Gumbo, Tricky Chopsticks, Penelope Rex and the Problem with Pets, Mahogany, While You Were Asleep, Spider in the Well, The Wonderful Wisdom of Ants, Yaya in the Sea, The Vegetables We Eat, The Mochi Makers, The Gabby That Germa War, Otter Doesn't Know, Babo, A Tale of Armenian Rug Washing Day, Small Things Mended, Purple Up, Sour Grass, My Momo La is a Museum, Party Rex, A Unicorn, a Dinosaur, and a Shark were riding a bicycle, I Am Extraordinary, Speck and Itty Bitty Epic, Mama's Panza, Lost Stick, I Am More Than, The Iguanodon's Horn, Gather Round, For You I Will, Mama in the Moon, Piper Chen Sings, Nen and the Lonely Fisherman, Aloha Everything, The Rock in My Throat, Boy, and Brave Baby Hummingbird. Editing me is going to be so angry. Editing me is going to be so upset because I don't have any of those books physically because I've returned them all to the library. Editing me is not going to be a happy camper, and that is fine. Okay, so there were a couple that I wanted to highlight and like highly recommend that I think you should check out. One of those being Yumbo Gumbo. This one is part of this math telling series, which I think are perfect books for younger readers who are finding themselves struggling with math. It takes math but puts it into a storytelling concept, which may make math more digestible for those kiddos who are struggling with math or looking for a new way to kind of understand mathematics. This specific one focuses on a family that is making gumbo, and so you see a lot of things about like counting and taking votes and measurements, and so those numbers play a huge role into the recipe of making gumbo, which I think culturally it introduces something different, and then it has that math aspect of it that makes it really interesting. These books are not like award-winning books, but I know a lot of parents and caregivers who kind of struggle with struggle with finding books that have mathematical concepts that are not so like textbooky and straightforward. They're looking for new ways to introduce math concepts, and so that series, a storytelling math series, is a really good series, and the latest one that they had just put out was Jumbo Gumbo, which is the one that I ended up reading. I also really enjoyed Mama's Panza. This one was a body positivity type of book, but it was from the perspective of like a mother and her child, and the child appreciating like her tummy. And I think that as someone who has, you know, brought life into this earth, your body changes so drastically after pregnancy. And it never is completely the same, except for those of us who are normal, you know, not rich celebrities who have all of these doctors and trainers working with them to snap their bodies back. For the rest of us, it's kind of like, you know, we try to get where we can get when we can get it, and that's about as good as it gets. But I like that this was body positivity and the mother speaking positively about herself and her body in front of her child, which is where I think that body positivity starts. Is you don't want your child to see you negatively self-talking your own physical appearance, because then that kind of opens up the gateway for that behavior to be normalized. And I liked that this was about loving your body, but it being that behavior being mimicked by an adult, by a caregiver, by a parent, and that child receiving that information and loving and appreciating the body that their mother has, which I thought was pretty cool. Another one that stands out to me is For You I Will. This is a very beautiful picture book about the relationship between a Black mother and her daughter, and just the things that she's willing to do for her daughter. And you get to see the daughter age up throughout the course of the book, which I thought was really, really interesting. And as a Black mom to a Black daughter, this one kind of struck a chord with me, because sometimes those relationships can be a little difficult. Especially, I think, speaking about the relationship between Black mothers and their daughters, there's a lot of feelings and research out there about those dynamics. And so it is nice to see the positive aspects of those relationships highlighted in this particular picture book. I really, really did enjoy it. Another one that I think is one of the most beautiful picture books that I read so far this year is Aloha Everything. This is one that I recently highlighted on my Instagram page, and it is a perfect book to read this month. It is AAP Heritage Month, and a lot of times people often forget to include Native Hawaiian books in those selections that we pick out, and this is one that just recently released, and it is breathtakingly gorgeous. It details so many different things about just the culture, the history, and the peoples of Hawaii, and it's absolutely stunning. The artwork, I can just see it in my head, and when I tell y'all that artwork is some of the best artwork that I have seen in a while, it very much so pays homage to the beautiful and rich and colorful history and culture that is Hawaii. So it kind of pairs very, very well with the intention of that book, which I really, really enjoyed. I'm trying to go through and think about, because there's so many that I read, and so many of them are good ones, but those are ones that I specifically, I think I have a couple maybe on the, because I had to write everything down and make it into a list because it was just so much stuff. I think so there were a couple. There was one in that first page that I did, Butterfly on the Wind. This one was really, really interesting. It was created by a deaf author and illustrator, and it was designed to show the connection between the butterfly and the deaf and hard of hearing community. And when I tell you, it was just absolutely beautiful. And it starts with a young girl who is about to perform, and she has butterflies in her stomach. And so she inevitably, it's metaphorical in a lot of ways, because she sends out this butterfly into the world. And as it interacts with other people who are deaf or hard of hearing, another butterfly is formed, and then it creates this beautiful like swarm of butterflies that eventually come back to support this main character. The messaging behind it I thought was really, really cool. And then learning about the history and the intention of what the author was trying to do with the butterfly and its symbolism for the community, I thought was done very well. And the fact that it was created by both a deaf illustrator and author, and the author said that he was very, very intentional about that was on purpose. I think that that's amazing. We don't have a lot of picture books like that, and so that was definitely a standout one for me. I mean, I had some other ones that were cute, but I'm reading so many picture books at this time that it becomes very clear when one stands out. And I never thought I would get to that place where it's like, you know, most of these I am rating 4 or 5 stars. There's always that odd 3-star book. There was one that I actually did not rate. It's called Like You Like Me. I did not rate that one because I was just shocked that that even made it to the publishing world. Like, I don't think that was handled very, very well. So, you know, usually if it's pretty bad, I won't even acknowledge, I won't acknowledge it, but I won't even rate it, because it's, you know, children's, I look at that a little bit differently. So I left that one unrated, but I did not like that one. But most of these have been decent reads, but those are the ones that really, honestly, they stood out to me the most. All right, so I'm gonna talk a little bit about the beginner readers that I read. It's not a lot. It's technically only 4 because I included a board book in that. list, and so it includes Horse and Buggy on Wheels, Curious George Colors Eggs, Little Critter Tricky Chicks, The Cool Bean Makes a Splash, and then the board book that I ended up reading was India on a Plate. I didn't necessarily have anything from that category that stood out to me. These were all pretty standard beginner readers. The Cool Beans Make a Splash, that's always going to do well simply because it's part of that series that everyone really loves. Curious George is always pretty, you know, big. I will say that India on the Plate, the board book, was fantastic. It's one of those board books that combats stereotypes associated with foods from different cultures. And I like that this one was done in a way that was accessible for those like 0 to 2-ish, maybe up to 3. But I like foodie based books, especially though, like I said, that challenge preconceived notions about food that is different to us culturally. And I loved that for every letter of the alphabet we were exposed to a different type of Indian food. I mean, I personally really enjoy Indian food, so it just made me hungry, but the intention behind it and allowing younger kids to experience food that is not something that maybe they typically eat every day, I thought that was pretty unique. So we're gonna go through the graphic novels really quickly. Remember that I am not going to be really talking about these because I'm going to save that for any type of wrap up or whatever that I may do on my other channel, but I did want to mention them here. This is a little bit weighted in the sense that I did participate in 30 and 30. I did not complete 30 and 30, but it did kind of elevate my numbers in this specific category. So I ended up reading Viewfinder, Lunar New Year Love Story, which is probably one of my favorites out of this list, Cursed Princess Club, another favorite out of this list, Mission 1, The Vice Principal Problem, Kyle's Little Sister, The Remarried Empress, Volume number 1, My Happy Marriage, Volume 2, Cat Massage Therapy, Volume 2, Delicious and Dungeon, Volume 1, Candy and Cigarettes, Volume 2, Villains Are Destined to Die, Volume 6, Sweat and Soap, Volumes 10 and 11, Tokyo Terroriba Girls, Volume 1, Say I Love You, Volumes 1 through 7. I am quite enjoying this series, which is one that I probably will push to finish at some point this year. Sign of Affection, Volume 2, Signals, Volume 1, The Great Pup Detective, Next Stop, Tomb Raider King, Volume 1, least favorite, probably will not continue that series, and then Super Boba Cafe, as well as King Cheer, which was a second in the series, like a companion series, the Arden High series. And I was so disappointed with that one. I don't think I'm going to continue that series. If there are any more, I don't know if there are going to be more, but as of right now, I'm not continuing that series. All right, since I'm not covering much with the graphic novels, comics, and manga, I am going to go ahead and jump into the novels. So first we have Blast Off, drawing Dina, The Night of the Storm, Just Happy to Be Here, Chronically Dolores, Rules for Rule Breaking, We're Never Getting Home, Night Watching, Black Girl You Are Atlas, The First State of Being, Greta and Valden, Bright Red Fruit, It's Boba Time for Pearl Lee, The Storm Runner, Arusha and the Tree of Wishes, Bunny and Clyde, ASAP, A Bit of Earth, Recitative. Listen, I'm finna, y'all know what I'm talking about. Avril Offline, Gigi Shin Is Not a Nerd, Camp Slovenia, and then Dead Girls Don't Say Sorry. Now, I'm kind of like up and down about that last little section because I can't remember, and I went and I looked at my videos and I didn't see any of those, but I could have just not noticed that I had covered those before. But there were a couple that I did want to highlight out of this one. The one by Toni Morrison. Because I'm not going to sit here on camera and struggle, okay? I'm not going to sit here on camera and struggle. So I ended up reading this one this past weekend, and it ended up being a group read. It was a random group read. We decided to read it and have a discussion about it, and I had this copy on Libro FM since it first became available, and I just had not picked it up. It's the only short story by Toni Morrison. And what is so unique about this story is that you are following two main characters, and you do not know which character is black or which character is white. And so these two girls originally meet because they're at a orphanage of sorts due to different circumstances, and you follow them as they have different interactions through the course of their life. This is a very, very short story. It's not long at all, but Toni Morrison says that this is a social experiment. So when you go into this book, a lot of how you perceive the character, certain things that are said, certain things that are done, you will have your experiences, your thoughts and your feelings about race and how you've been socially constructed play into who you think is black and who you think is white. And having a conversation about what pieces of this story made us kind of cue into thinking one person was one way and the other was the other was very interesting. A lot of that had to do with how we perceive certain social stereotypes, how we perceive how black people or white people would react in certain situations, a lot of how we perceive what each racial group would have done during historical moments played a role. And I think that it's one of those pieces of literature that generates conversation. There technically is no right or wrong answer to this, because your life experiences and how you perceive race is really going to play a huge role in how you perceive these characters. And I think it's so fascinating that all of us read the same exact thing, yet we come out of it experiencing completely different things. I think that this is a heck of a social experiment, and of course done by Toni Morrison. We can expect nothing less from her as such a wonderful and fascinating human. But that was one that I heavily wanted to mention. I think I'm still trekking through some of the Rick Riordan Presents stuff, which is why you saw that I finished Stormrunner and Arusha and the Tree of Wishes. I've been reading quite a bit of middle grade and quite a bit of books that touch on the dynamics of friendship. One of those books being Dead Girls Don't Say Sorry. This is one that I had, I think, brought up maybe on a live or somewhere else, but it's not one that I think I've necessarily reviewed yet here on this channel. And it's not also one that I have not reviewed yet on Goodreads. But in this one, we're following a main character who is dealing with the untimely passing of a close friend. They're in high school, and this takes place, the beginning of the book is taking place after this friend's passing. And so we are working with this character as they work through their emotions regarding the character that's no longer living. Now, as you make your way through the novel, it starts going back and forth. So you get a present timeline and you're getting a past timeline, and you start to learn about the toxicity that was their friendship, how twisted their friendship was, and this character almost feeling a sense of relief that they no longer have to deal with the toxic nature of their relationship because this person is no longer alive. And it brings forth this question of, have you ever been in such a toxic situation with someone that it would be such a relief if you no longer had to do it? Like if something was just to happen. And I'm not saying that people wish death upon anybody, but it is that question that comes up. If this person wasn't living, how much of a relief would it be off of your shoulders? Like, how do you get out of the situation? And so we actually see this play out where she was drowning in this relationship, and now that this person is no longer living, it's like, I can breathe. But then comes that guilt. like, dang, like I'm not happy that this person died, but the relationship was very much so toxic. It was abusive in nature, to be honest with you. And a lot of times we talk about abusive relationships in YA that exist between romantic partners, and often like parental figures and you know, guardians. But there is some relationships here, friendships, that can be abusive in nature as well. And so Dead Girls Don't Say Sorry definitely captures those things. The time of this stuff that I've read, I found a book that I really ended up loving as well, and a book that I did not like at all. Starting with the negative, I finished The Night of the Storm, which had actually taken me a couple months to read. And it usually does not take me a very long time to read books, but I kept, even physically, it does not take me that long, but I kept losing interest in this one, and I was reading it physically. And it is a adult thriller, which y'all know I've been trying to creep my way back into some adult literature stuff, because I read a lot of kids stuff, which there's nothing wrong with it, but I also would like to read some more stuff that's targeted at adults, although I don't always find it to be super interesting. But The Night of the Storm was one that I thought was interesting, or that it had the potential to be interesting, because it takes place during Hurricane Harvey in Texas, and we're following a main character who ends up at her sister's house to shelter in place during the storm. And while they're there, somebody ends up dying. It's kind of like this closed door or closed room murder type of situation, because the murder happens in the house and they can't leave because it's the middle of a hurricane. So it has potential to be interesting, but there was a lot of pacing issues in this one. There was a lot of characters that you just couldn't root for, which I don't necessarily have a problem with, but if you're creating a widespread group of characters that are not really likable, like everybody just is morally bankrupt in some ways, or everyone has some qualities that just makes it difficult to root for them, you've got to have a banging plot behind it. And I think that this one did not, it didn't do that for me. So the characters were hard to root for. I think with the main character, because she was a single mom, there were certain aspects about her character I was like, oh yeah, I definitely relate to it. But then there's certain things I was just like, what are you doing? Like, what is going on here? And it was really easy to figure out the plot of this one. There were some dead giveaways in the beginning of the book that were very noticeable, where I was able to put the pieces of the puzzle together very quickly. And so even there was like a small twist at the end to kind of shock you, but by that time I was so through, I just didn't care enough. The writing was interesting enough, although I said, like, pacing wise, it did lose me at some points. And this is a debut, so while I did not think highly of this one, that's not me saying that I'm going to write this author off, but this very much so was a debut, and it was not a well constructed thriller. Compared to some of the thrillers I've read this year, this one did not hold up, and so that was probably one of my lowest rated ones, which I think I only gave that one 2 stars. But in comparison, I ended up reading a young adult book, Chronically Dolores, one of my favorite books of 2024, easily hands down. And it was completely and totally unexpected, because I had no idea what this book was about going into it. This is one of those young adult books that I keep crying and asking for, where I'm like, we have nothing to give those kids that are on the lower spectrum of YA, 13, 14, like, this is it. This is the book that I think would fit perfectly for that age group. We're following a main character by the name of Dolores. She has a chronic illness called Icy, which causes pain and issues with her bladder. And she has had some accidents at school, and she's dealing with the fallout of a friendship because of her chronic illness. And she ends up meeting another character who's on the spectrum. And she is a hoot, the second character. She's amazing. She teaches Dolores a lot about life and about seeing people for who they are, because the character that's on the spectrum deals with a mother who treats her being on the spectrum as a illness in a way that she can't socialize with anyone. She must be homeschooled. She must be kept locked in the house. She can't have any experiences. She can't go anywhere because her mother is so grossly afraid of how the world may perceive her. And it becomes tragic in a way because she doesn't allow her child to really experience anything, and she's trapped. And so Dolores tries to break her out of this kind of box that her own mother has put her in. And their relationship is really interesting because it starts off very transactional on Dolores' side. She sees her as a way to get back with her old best friend that has pretty much dumped her. But through the course of the relationship, I think the two of them learned so much about themselves and so much about each other. And this is, you know, one of those books where everything doesn't end up perfectly, because at the same time Dolores is dealing with her family really falling apart. Her mom works a lot and her dad has a gambling problem, and it rears its ugly head at the most inopportune time, to the point that her mother's like, I've had enough. And so we're seeing kind of the breakup of a family in some ways, and other family members having to come in and be supportive. Her brother is amazing. I think her brother's absolutely amazing. She has an aunt that from her father's side that has a pretty rocky relationship with her mother, but all of that comes full circle in the end. I think that this was beautifully written. The author of this book also has IC and is on the spectrum. So they're pulling from a plethora of their own experiences and how they've been impacted growing up with those two things kind of interplaying with each other. I love this book. This book kept me engaged from start to finish. And there are books where I can pick out bits and pieces, and it can be a strong book or it could be a solid book. But for me, a 5-star book is one that I am just blown away by from the time that I start the book up until the time that I finish the book. And this is one that was absolutely done well. It's one that probably is not going to get a lot of attention. It's not one that is going to be hyped up on social media, but I wish more people would read it. It is one that's definitely going to fly under the radar, and I wish it didn't, because it is so good. It was so well done and well crafted, and hands down, like I said, one of my favorite books of 2024. All right, y'all, so this was a wrap-up of sorts. This was not a complete wrap-up. This was a wrap-up of sorts, because as you can see just by me listing the titles, I read a lot of stuff. I read a lot of stuff this month, and it just I say this month, but like in the past, like I would say maybe 4 to 6 weeks. And so sitting down and reviewing all of these books would have been incredibly time consuming and taxing. And so unfortunately you won't get those in-depth reviews on this, but starting next week, now that I have this thing that's been looming over my head, now that I have this out the way, it'll be nice to kind of shift back into doing the weekly wrap-ups where I can give you my full-length thoughts and opinions about everything. So as always, y'all, let me know in the comments down below what you've been reading. What are your plans for the rest of the month? And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more content from me, click the subscribe button, hit the bell for notifications. And if you're looking for ways to support the channel, all the links will be down in the description box as well as the ways to follow me on social media. And I will be back with another video soon. Bye. Like a blazing flare,